Kiki, welcome, and I want to thank you for rescheduling. First of all, I know we had you on earlier, and we had a little I had a little issue with in the family stuff, so we had to reschedule. But thank you for being here.
I'm happy to be here. My condolences for the loss of your father.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I think it's well, it's always tough, but I mean, it's good to know that they leave you in good stead, that you can deal with life if they've raised you well, and once they're gone, you're still able to be strong and all that stuff. So I think that's a good credit to him and so on and so forth. Hey, for folks that aren't familiar with you, would you mind, where are you at, first of all? Kiki, where are you located?
I'm actually living on my sailboat.
Oh, wow.
And
you got a Wi-Fi signal, so you must be docked somewhere, I'm assuming.
Yes, I am. I'm in a marina. We also tuck into a marina or into a safe harbor when there's big weather. So we had some big winds last night, probably up to 40 miles per hour or something like that. So sorry, I'm just playing with these settings, and that seems like the best one. So I'm currently in Oriental, North Carolina. North Carolina is a much bigger state than I thought. And I've been involved in yoga for 40 years. And hand in hand with my yoga involvement, for most of that, I was vegetarian. And I embraced these ideas around this vegetarian way of life from a young age when I was about 19. But I even aspired to be a vegetarian earlier than that as a teenager. I suppose for the same reason that teenagers aspire to that today, for some kind of perfect, beautiful, way of eating that doesn't harm anyone. And I fell for all of the information that this was going to be some kind of exalted way of eating and health. And I started yoga. I studied theater. I was a professional actress and dancer for many years. And as part of my theater studies, I went to New York University. I was introduced to really so many movement systems early on. In addition to dance, I was introduced to yoga. I was introduced to Pilates. I was introduced to fascial release techniques back in the early 80s. We were using rolling pins like you would make pecan pie with. And we were working with fascial release. We were rolling on tennis balls and doing things that are maybe more well-known now, Feldenkrais technique and Alexander technique. So I was always really interested in exploring ways of moving that could bring an optimal feeling mentally, physically, more vitality. And also as a performer, this idea, could I be more optimal in the way that I expressed myself through movement or through acting, through theater, film, etc. And I just loved doing yoga. And at that time in the early 80s, very few people really knew what yoga was. I opened a yoga school in Los Angeles in 1996 in Silver Lake neighborhood on Sunset Boulevard, which I ran for over 10 years. And when I was calling landlords, back when we actually called people, and I said, oh, hi, I saw your sign for rent. And they said, what kind of business? And I said, yoga. And they'd go, yogurt, no food. And they'd hang up the phone. So now yoga is really mainstream, and that's great when any movement system or anything that really can make us healthy goes mainstream. And so many people love it, mostly women, I would say, are really attracted to it. Those certainly can benefit everyone. And but what's going along with this yoga in the mainstream is this mainstreaming of, living on foods that human beings have never lived on, like almond milk and the so-called oat milk, and being vegetarian, and somehow thinking that this vegetarianism is really part of yoga, or that it's part of some kind of nutritional, or more dangerously, some kind of spiritual superiority. And it's certainly linked to that for sure in people's minds.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you about the origins of yoga and where we got that, where that came from. It's kind of interesting because I had I guess an Eastern medicine Ayurvedic examination. I had a physician do that to me just for fun when I was out in Malaysia, and it was, a fellow from India. And, he basically said I need to eat basically a vegetarian diet. And I kind of was a little bit laughing about that. But, the funny thing, because he knew I was a physician and he was concerned, himself, and he was asking me for advice because he was B12 deficient. And I was just, I said, well, it's pretty obvious to me what you should probably be doing. But where does yoga come from, and why do we have this sort of belief system that, first of all, it's primarily female dominant, at least here in the United States or in Western world, I think. And then this relationship between yoga and vegetarianism or not eating much meat, or where did that come from?
Yeah, I've done a lot of research in this to correct a lot of the false information that I had embraced. Yoga is coming from the Indus Valley, from the area today that we know as India. There are sculptures and seals and coins that are dated to be, older than 2,000 years, where maybe a god or a yogi, a meditator, is sitting in a lotus pose. So we understand that there were these yoga postures. Yoga, the true meaning of yoga, we would say yoga is an illuminated state of mind, or yoga is a way that we can use our mind to be free from suffering and to not just act on habituated thoughts and habituated responses and reactions, to always be in some kind of stressed out, emotional, reactive state. And so there were these seekers, meditators, who sought a way to have this control. We can certainly, look in our everyday life and we can say, like, oh my God, these superior athletes, they have something that they can control their mind, say for you in your training, that they can do these extreme things that most people wouldn't do. It's about being able to have an agency in our own mind. And we could look at the same for people that achieve extraordinary things in business or whatever it might be. So there was this idea, and we can all experience that life can be suffering. I can imagine 3,000, 4,000 years ago, there was a lot of suffering because there wasn't, medical supports, and people were, just at the influences of weather changes or monsoons or, droughts and things like that. So there was a way, there were practices that one could do. These practices are known as yoga: meditational practices, visualization practices, breathing practices, postural movement or postural, fitness practices that could impact our mind, that ultimately impact our ability over our nervous system to turn off the stress response and to have a mindfulness in the presence and, move forward. So this yoga seeking, yogis, the original yogis, were really radicals. And yoga, if anyone's familiar with the term, what's known as hatha yoga, more correctly pronounced hatha yoga. Hatha means a forceful path. And taking these extreme physical positions and breathing positions and other activities was to really force the consciousness to shift out of habits and to a new place. So the yogis were not involved in the government and society at large, which we see yoga as a reformation movement. And like we can see in many religious traditions, the priests become more governing of people's lives. And so there's a reformation against that. And that's happened in India at many different times throughout history. Buddha, the original historical Buddha, he was a yogi. The story that we know about Buddha's life, he was a prince. He grew up inside a sheltered, walled, castle. And when he went outside the castle walls, he really saw suffering for the first time in his life. And he wanted to put an end to suffering. And that's where he went out and did what the yogis do. He went into the woods. He starved himself. He ate, very little food. And he basically had his big epiphany when he was like a starving bag of bones. And a dairy maid, a young woman carrying milk from the cows, gave him a bowl of milk. And I'm sure all of us know that feeling if we were vegan or vegetarian, or if we had poor health. The what he got from that milk, and sort of the boost in the clarity that he got, it helped him understand that there was a middle path to coming to know our mind and be free from suffering, and that we didn't have to do these extreme things. So vegetarianism was actually not part of the original, what we think of the Vedic culture. And there's this caste system. We hear about a caste system in India. This caste system still exists today, even though there are changes. Even though India is the largest democracy in the world, 1 billion plus, this caste system, we could say, keeps it from being a true democracy, because all people are not equal under these caste rules. But within the caste, there's different ways of eating. And there's a caste that was always the sort of the priestly caste, the keeper of the traditional information, the ones who memorized all of the Sanskrit texts and knew all the rites and the rituals and everything like that. They were advisors to the kings. Believe it or not, the caste of kings and warriors were not vegetarian. They ate meat. This is what allowed them to be extraordinary warriors. Not only did they eat meat, if we look at the history of India, we know that there's always been a great tradition of hunting there. The traditional text on Ayurveda, the health system of India, or the traditional India, often referred to as the sister science of yoga. Ayurveda actually means Ayuhu, longevity. The science of longevity, Veda meaning a knowledge system. And the very beginning of this book, the Charaka Samhita, the text on the science of longevity, says we need longevity to attain to our human life of meaning. And we must fulfill our dharma, our unique gifts as a human being, our duties to our parents who gave us life, our duties to our society to make it a highly functioning and peaceful society, and we must fulfill our duties to our gifts. We each have our own innate gifts. We want to share them in the world. And then we need to earn on those gifts, and we need to earn so much we can look after everyone we love and give back to our community. And when we've done that, then we have a duty actually to have pleasure. So Kama, people have heard of the Kama Sutra. This is a traditional text on pleasure. We think of it as an erotic. It's often thought of as just an erotic text, courtly text. But actually it's saying, no, having pleasure, having life experience, enjoying the best that there is part of this majestic world and part of our human experience. And then after we've enjoyed like anything, then we can renounce. Then we can look for that final liberation. And certainly, traditionally, we see people doing this at the end of their life. People become ill and they start to prepare themselves for what's up ahead, or for those final days, whatever it is, based on their belief system. So this Ayurveda says we need longevity because to fulfill these 4 aims of our debts to society and on our sharing our gifts in the world, earning on that, actually earning the opportunity to have massive pleasure, and then also to be ready to renounce, we need 100 years. And at the very beginning of this text, it says, the biggest harm that we can do is to harm our individual self, and to take the foods that harm the individual self. And for that purpose, this entire Charaka Samhita, this entire text exists. And it actually collates 200 animals for eating, and animals that we might not ever eat. Like for beauty, for all those ladies on the line, we should be eating peacock and turtles and things like that. So we understand that traditionally people ate thousands of types of food. Even in the Amazon today, people are eating hundreds of types of food. And we have this homogenized society. I mean, yes, I only eat 3 or 4 right now, but because I ate a homogenized diet of very few foods that have traditionally not been eaten that way, I did harm my health, and I healed my health on a carnivore diet, and I'm still doing that today. So animals were eaten for all these different purposes, and it's understood even in Ayurveda today, the most healing food is bone broth, is mamsa rasayan, is a broth made from tissue, animal tissue, muscle, and bones, and then also that marrow. So even 2,000 years ago, they understood that marrow was extremely healing. But today's Ayurvedic doctors, and I went to the best Ayurvedic doctors, they've torn these pages out of these traditional system. So we're not going to get the outcomes that we seek because they're leaving out this information. Even probably the person who introduced Ayurveda to the United States and the Western world is Deepak Chopra. Many people might be familiar with who he is, and very, multi-title author. And even on his website today, it says like, Ayurveda, eat from the rainbow. Nowhere in Ayurveda does it say eat from the rainbow. These are very modern ideas. Actually, Ayurveda warns against eating seeds and grains. They only list a handful of vegetables as being eaten. But in India, regrettably, India is not a place that we can look to for great health, because we see a terrible crisis going on there with diabetes and obesity. I first traveled to India in 1995 to study yoga, and I traveled to the very vegetarian South India. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. I'm vegetarian. This is vegetarian. And it led me to even deepen these, learned ideas that somehow the way that we eat could affect our spiritual preparedness or our spiritual ability. The Brahmin caste, the priestly caste, they have been burdened with being vegetarian. It is the belief that was given to them that makes them uniquely positioned to share the spiritual teachings. This idea is being exploited by Hindu fundamentalists. So those of us in the US know that there are Christian fundamentalists, or many different types. We know overseas there are, Muslim fundamentalists. In India, there are all those things. But this idea that there's a Hindu superiority based on vegetarian, based on tradition, is a rewriting. It's not true, and it is used to create discontent there. I would say it was a gift to me that one of my teachers in India, when I was like, I'm eating meat, he said, only we have to do this. We were born to fulfill this. No one else has to eat this way. It's understood that it's a sacrifice. And it's promoted, even the Bhagavad-Gita, which is probably the most widely religious text read, or at least placed on the mantelpiece, or the equivalent of the mantelpiece in the world. The Bhagavad-Gita says that there is a pure way of eating, a way of eating that excites the senses, which is dangerous for spiritual well-being, the carnal senses. And then there is a way of eating that is based on decrepitude and disease and death, and that would be animal foods. And that's really a rewriting of the traditions. Originally, every sacrifice, animal sacrifice, and this fire sacrifice, fire ceremony is a huge part of Indian traditions. And there were actually abattoir, slaughterhouses on the temple grounds, because for an auspicious occasion, someone would slaughter 1,000 cattle, 10,000 cattle. A king would say, oh, here's this auspicious occasion or event, let's slaughter all this. But everybody would participate, they would eat, they would be sustained and enjoy it. as things changed in India, there was actually a period of where Buddhism rose up and was the dominant belief system in India, which that history is almost completely lost, and it was lost archaeologically. It was only rediscovered about, I don't know, 150 years ago or something like that. And the Buddhists were acting out against really the excess of animal sacrifice that was going on. And so it kind of went on the government books like this kind of animal sacrifice is not allowed, even though it did continue. For the priestly caste, who were generally paid in cattle, cattle was actually a medium of exchange. It held a great value. Living cattle is certainly, dairy is certainly more valuable than dead cattle. And India being an agrarian society, most of the religious rites and rituals are around agrarianism, around bringing the rain and having enough crops and everything like that. Then dairy is an essential part of Indian health. And the cow is revered in India. It's not sacred. It's not worshipped, so to speak. It's not put on an altar and worshipped. But it is deemed to be sacred because it is providing essential nutrients through milk, cream, butter, or clarified butter, which is ghee. An interesting point about ghee is it doesn't need to be refrigerated. And so if you could keep your ghee, your clarified butter, and never get water or bacteria in it, it could remain fresh for 100 years. And some Ayurvedic doctors do have 100-year-old ghee, which they will, use medicinally with different herbs and things like that. And then additionally in India for the cow, the urine is used. So that's used topically, and I think urine is antibacterial and things like that. I think soldiers are taught how to use that. It can be drunk in extreme situations. I have to say, traveling to India is amazing and fascinating. I've been at least 15 times. I've studied there for 3 to 6 months at a time. But I've actually seen this twice. If I hadn't seen a second time, I wouldn't have believed it. There's cows wandering in the street, and a cow will lift its tail will rise, and when its tail rises, jump back because it's about to urinate, and just this heavy torrential shower of urine will come out. I have seen twice on different occasions an individual jump and squat beneath the shower of urine because of the belief of the benefits it is for skin conditions. And I was just frozen in astonishment. I'm like, well, I've heard about this. I've read about it. I've never seen it. And then I probably had to watch for 5 more years, like whenever I would see a cow's tail rising and be like, is it going to happen again? Is it going to happen again? And I did see it again. And then the cow dung, the cow patties, it's very common to see this in India. They are scooped up, barehanded by, say, more working, people on the lower economic scale. They take the cow dung, they put it into patties, and they paste it all over the trunks of trees wherever it can dry, all over walls and houses. And so you see these mud pies everywhere, and that is free fuel. That's free kitchen fuel. And very important. And then a few days later, they're cracking those off the wall and carrying their patties home, possibly in a tray on their head. So the cow is very important. Even though there is a strong belief that the cow is essential and important and is really akin to being like one's mother, because of how it nourishes everyone. When, just like in farming all over the world, when a cow is injured, when it no longer produces milk, people cannot afford to feed an animal or maintain an animal. If an ox is hit by a car, it can no longer pull a cart. very often these animals are abandoned. And also in India, and I've witnessed it, and it's pretty emotional. Male cows have less purpose because they're not dairy cows. So young cows are tied away from the mother cow so that they won't nurse. And then those cows are starved to death. And that has been conditioned to be acceptable sometimes. And we were these, like radical international yogis, and we're like untying the cows who are crying and bleating so that they can run to their mothers and drink. And we were told, you don't understand, you don't understand. So, there's belief systems, and then there's things in practice that make sense. But that being said, there are wonderful cow sanctuaries in India where people are rescuing cows and looking after them and everything like that. So, yes, this yoga goes back thousands of years. It's had a very strong influence on those that are just looking in an individual way for sort of happiness and joy and peace of mind. And then also it's been integrated into multiple religious, different religious ways of practicing religion under Hinduism. India was not one country until the British quit India in the 1940s. It was hundreds of countries and hundreds of languages. And so Hinduism or religion was practiced in hundreds, thousands of different ways in thousands of different towns and villages. It's probably only under the Indian diaspora where Indian, doctors and software workers and tech and hardware, they're traveling all over the world. And they're, say, all at Infosys or they're at Google or something like that, that people from areas of India that may never have met each other, that have differing ways of practicing Hinduism, that may be of different castes and wouldn't unite in India because of their shared circumstances in the West. They are uniting and creating temples together. And so Hinduism looks very different in the US today than it might look in India, and certainly how, it looks over there. In terms of yoga becoming popular for women, fitness was not, I'm sure many, women over 50 or 55 or 60 have been attracted to fitness from a young age, but fitness, people weren't really fit. When I was in high school, I graduated high school in 1980 and I ran track. We got something called a Nautilus system, and Nautilus weightlifting system was really like the weightlifting systems we have today, where one could safely lift weight and stack weight. So all of those machines that we see in the gyms, it's very safe. You move a pin and you've just added 10 or 20 or 100 pounds. So Nautilus really introduced a system for moving weight, lifting weight, that was safe for people who were untrained, but it was safe for girls. And so in my high school, we got a Nautilus system. It was in the boys' fit locker room. We had to get special permission. We had to be walked to the boys' locker room, out the other side, so that we could train with weights. And just doing a few basic things on Nautilus, we were nervous. Were we going to get muscles, So, but we did improve. So not many people were interested in fitness. I continued to run through college. I was inclined to dance. I continued to dance. I got into yoga. Very few women were doing fitness. And I think a lot of fitness centers are very male dominated. I remember teaching yoga in gyms in New York City in the late 80s, and there was a lot of grunting and groaning. So we're in the yoga room and there is a window out into the fitness room, and I would play music just to dull the grunting and groaning. And in the next room, there was just like, huh, 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 and men are like throwing weights to the ground. I think that yoga was very inviting to women. One, women tend to be more naturally flexible than men. And so there's that really nice thing like, oh, wow, I can do this. And women just really liked that way of training. And it was almost just like fitness centers for women. And most men stayed away from there. Most of us don't like to do something that we can't do well right off the beginning. And so a lot of men stayed out of yoga rooms because no one likes that feeling of being like the stiffest person in the room. So yes, yoga is mostly female. And I think I've seen yoga change so much since I started. Today, what I would call the Instagram yoga, and not that there's, that's great. We didn't used to take pictures of ourselves. We didn't used to take pictures of our food. We didn't used to take pictures of ourselves working out or doing yoga or, posing like models and stuff. But social media and iPhones and, smartphones changed all that. I think yoga is being taught today primarily around flexibility. And this is not the best therapeutic application of yoga, because flexibility, hypermobility is a weakness. So over flexibility or hypermobility in a joint, which a lot of what we call flexibility becomes like a joint hypermobility. And that's really a weaker joint. Just looking for flexibility is also, I see a comment here, true. I'm going to open this chat, but I don't want to get too distracted, but I appreciate all of this. To the person that said, I'm so knowledgeable. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've been at this a long time. So what we see is a kind of a hyper flexibility. We see a laxity. So when we're looking for flexibility, we're actually like releasing and looking for a laxity rather than having the supportive strength on the other side. So I could kind of like bend my arm like this, and I'm using this bicep to bend my arm, or I could bend my arm like this. So like this is not the way that we want to be practicing anything. We really want to be practicing with strength. I actually registered a Guinness Book of World Record recently for the longest held downward dog. And I say registered because of these unique times that we're in. It might take me 6 months to hear back from the Guinness book. And the reason I did it, well, I was inspired by you, Shawn, and by every guest that you had on Human Outlier podcast. I was like, God, all these people have world records. I wonder if I could get a world record. And so I was like, well, let's see what's happening on the Guinness Book of World Records. And there's actually very few yoga records for holding something the longest. There was really only about 3 or 4. And so I thought, well, what could I hold for an hour? And I thought I could hold a downward dog for an hour. And when I told people, oh yeah, I just registered this or did this, or people would say, oh my God, I heard you're the person that just did this. They'd say, what did you have to do? I said, well, I had to have my hands and feet flat. And they're like, flat? You had your heels flat? That's impossible. No, that's a downward dog. And there's a technique that we can do. There is yoga technique. And that's really why I did the record, was to show really a yoga asana. And if the positions are called asanas, and asana means a seat, a platform, a foundation, even a chair would be called an asana in Sanskrit. So an asana should be sthira, that means steady. And the way that I therapeutically learned the yoga was that the whole body is firm and strong and stable. And so I did a stable downward dog for an hour and 20 seconds. And it had to be a public event and everything like that, and follow all these rules. My fingers began to fall asleep. I hadn't counted on that. Maybe at the 45-minute mark. And I thought, I could go longer, but if I fall on my face at an hour and a half, it's not really yoga. So let me come down and do this. So there is yoga technique. The technique is not around flexibility or hypermobility. Some people are just born more hypermobile. I would say I was born that way. I was born pigeon-toed. I had super floppy feet. I still have floppy feet. And I remember I could put my legs behind my head when I was like 8 years old. There was another boy in my class that could do it. And so we were kind of like little troublemakers doing that. Otherwise, acrobats or contortionists, dancers, gymnasts are trained into hypermobility at a young age. And the kind of training that children who move towards these professional careers do is actually has many negative effects. It reduces how much they grow or their ability to develop and have their menstruation, etc. So hypermobility is trained in young. We shouldn't be we all would like to increase our range of motion. That's a great idea, but we don't want to be hypermobile. And the muscle has a stretch response. It's only going to stretch so far. And then it stops the stretch. And so if the body continues to stretch, it's a ligament. It's the kind of the iliosacral joint. So the ligaments are stretching, and much like a pregnant woman is going to start to get terrible back pain because of this added weight. Those are those ligaments stretching, and these ligaments, I don't know, Doc, you could speak to it more than I, but they can become like old rubber bands. They're not going to regain their tautness. And so we see a lot of yoga pain, particularly on women, because women, men have a distribution of weight and muscles and how they carry weight in their upper body and their shoulders. Women don't have that. We rest things on our hips, like babies or buckets of laundry or whatever. We might rest on our hips. Or on women on their heads. And, for anyone who's traveled throughout the world, you see women carrying great loads on their head, and their hips are still moving and they appear to be completely comfortable. So women doing yoga are getting a lot of strain in here, in their neck and shoulders, in their lower backs, thing like that. Now add to those yoga injuries, malnutrition, and there's no way they're going to recover. So I gave you a very long act. Yes, please jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of interesting, fascinating points. So, a couple comments. I mean, recently there was an archaeologic paper done on the Indus Valley looking at, pottery from several thousand years back, and showed high levels of animal-based fat residues, showing that they consumed very high-level, meat-rich diet back in those days. And so that clearly is their historical. So what you're saying, has been shown in some of the archaeologic records. I've seen when I was in Africa with the Maasai, they similarly use some of the cow dung for a lot of things, constructing homes. And I think they even use that somewhat degree for facial type stuff, I believe. And I don't doubt that. And there's been stuff, I think urine or some of the, urea has been used traditionally in skincare products historically. So
yes,
we have that out there. And then, the point you bring about the joint hypermobility, I completely concur. I mean, there is a functional range, and it's for whatever you're doing, whether it's a sport or an event. And then there's, a hyperlaxity, which can lead to ligament and joint instability and pain and arthritic problems. The question I was going to ask you when you're talking about with the cows, obviously they've got this tradition of, sort of, like you said, not sacred, but very much revered cows. When they die of natural causes, I mean, what happens to them? Do they eat them at that point? Do they bury them? I mean, it seems like, hey, at least if they're going to die anyway, it's time to eat them at this point. What happens then?
It's a great question. What happens is you call the scavenger caste, or you call the Christians, Because see, in India, there's so many Christians, right? Christianity was introduced to India even before the British, when the British came. Well, the Portuguese were there. In Goa, you see a lot of old Catholic churches and iconography in India. So you call the the scavenger cast, and they are permitted to touch dead cow and dead carcasses and dead crows and dead rats. They're not permitted to touch other people because they would be deemed unclean. This is how far this caste, conditioning goes. They'll cut it off and they'll sell this, they'll take it to the glue factory or whatever it is. In India, there's huge sugar consumption. All over the world, sugar is actually filtered through cow bones. So even in India, all that white sugar consumption, that is filtered through cow bones. So cow bones are used in various ways in India, just as we know they're used for glue and things like that. So the people who work with that, they'll cart them off. There are certain states have an industry for cattle, for meat eating, for for animal skin, for cowhide and things like that. So it all goes to use. I mean, India, and I'm sure other nations, people are so incredibly creative how to earn money at that lowest, the people that are living on the street. They can turn everything into some kind of money or sustenance. So it all is used. It doesn't just rot in the street.
That's good to hear. I'm interested, obviously, you had this vegetarian journey. How did you get from there to here to carnivore? Because obviously that's a unique thing. In fact, on my Instagram just posted, there's a gal by the name of Donna Leach from Houston, Texas, and she's always doing. I just saw her. Yeah, she's doing these crazy figure 8 push-ups and all these things at age 72. I'm really impressed, but I don't know anything about it because I don't do. I did yoga a few times in my life, but I really haven't really pursued it very much. But how did you go from vegetarian to now carnivore? Because that's obviously not common among the community you're part of.
I had just increased failing health, and I had become B12 anemic, but I didn't know it. This is about maybe about 12 years ago. That didn't turn me into a meat eater overnight, but I was exhausted. I was fainting. I had hallucinations. I had so much joint and body pain. But it timed exactly when my stepmother died. My father was dying. My father died. I got a divorce. I moved across the country. I moved my father's home and moved him across the country. And then he passed away, and I was just like, I'm grieving. I'm overcome with anxiety. This is why I feel so badly. And I was in India, and I was telling a friend, a British friend, how exhausted I felt. And she said, oh, well, a lot of us that spend a lot of time in India, we realize we're B12 anemic, and it sounds like you have B12 anemia. And I was like, oh my God, what can I do? And I literally let a non-medical personnel jab, a B12 shot into my thigh. And I will tell you, it was like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. My whole world woke up. And then I got tested there, and the Indian doctors were shocked. They were like, but you cannot have B12 anemia. You're an American. That's just not possible. So that was a step back, a step in the right direction. And I went to a doctor, and he was like, you're so vitamin D deficient, you're vitamin B across the board, you're the B12, you need to eat eggs, you need to eat sardines. So I did that for about a year or less. And the belief system is like, okay, I did this to get better, it's medicinal, but now I'm back to that pure diet. But I just continued to feel terrible. I had overall joint pain. I woke up in the middle of the night because it was painful to turn over in bed. It woke me up if I turned over in bed. I had so much inflammation in my hips. And I told you, like, I was this very like bendy, floppy kid. I used to like cross my legs over themselves, like over and around again. And people go, how do you sit like a pretzel? I had so much inflammation in my joints. I couldn't bring my knees together sitting. I couldn't lift, my leg couldn't lift itself up and cross it over the other one in that kind of typical way that, you know, most women will sit in a chair or at a table. And it just got worse. And then I got rashes. I had tinnitus. I had ear ringing. I had like seeping ears. I had 1,000 different symptoms. And I think I had things going on that people would say, oh, well, you're at that age now. And it's like, I have been involved in fitness and yoga and, stretching to the boundaries of, performance. And I'm not going to be clumped under some, heading that says you're over 50 and your hair is going to start to thin or fall out, or you're going to be like decrepit. I don't buy it. Or that your joints are just going to have overuse syndrome. I don't buy it. And so I was, secretly reading. I was like secretly reading about the Weston Price Foundation, about paleo, about keto. And it really just came to me saying to myself, like, everything that you're doing, nothing is helping. I felt like I was walking in a cave, and I thought I was walking toward the light, but I was walking deeper into the darkness, and I had to turn around and come out. And I started doing the first thing I did was make bone broth. And we were originally going to speak on Thanksgiving, which I thought was interesting because Thanksgiving 3 years ago, my boyfriend brought like half a turkey home from a Thanksgiving. And he, at the time, lived upstate. When he went back upstate, I had half a dead turkey in my refrigerator. And that was really the impetus to make bone broth. And bone broth just made so much sense to me. And I, of course, picked all the meat off because I would never eat meat. And I boiled up those bones. And I took a sip, and my hands and feet were warm for the first time in like 20 years. And the ringing in my ears calmed down. Thank you, Brett. And it was just a huge change for me. And I continued. Fortunately, I had the support of my boyfriend who ate meat. He's in the organic food biz. So he kind of ate the best of everything, like, organic, grass-fed, everything like that. So that, we were aligned around that. And I just kept going. And I had to really overcome a learned revulsion. I had to overcome all this religious programming, this kind of yoga programming. I had read all of the Seventh-day Adventist type books and the early social warrior justice books, Diet for a New Planet, Diet for a New America. And I really thought that I was making a difference. And I did I do it? Did I change the world, you guys, through 25 years of eating lentils and rice? No, I did not. So yes, bone broth is human medicine. So then I just kept going. And when I really gave full expression to it, I ate probably for lunch for 6 months, a pound of burger and a pound of bacon. I was so hungry. And my hair, which I always wore my hair short, which I enjoyed, but my hair grew so slowly. And now it's like, I just thought, well, I'll always have short hair because the time it would take to grow it out is too, long. Now my hair is growing, my nails are growing, everything is stronger. I remember when I first started chewing meat, I could barely chew. Like my masticator muscles were so weak. I thought all my teeth were just going to like pop out of my head. And I really did a ton of research. I kept coming up with this Google search. Dr. ShawnBaker on Joe Rogan changed my life. And I was like, who's Joe Rogan? I mean, that's where I was like so out of it. And then I was like, I had all my like yoga ideas about how people should look. I was like, who's this guy in this trucker's cap doing videos from his car. Like I can't even, so, but I just kept going. I listened to every human outlier podcast. I listened to everything from the kind of low carb, high fat, low carb down under. And I just kept educating myself. I created enough of an encyclopedia of knowledge in my mind to just keep going. And I just felt fantastic. I feel like I regained like 20 lost years, and not to take away from all of the amazing things that I did in those 20 years, but just to feel so poorly and feel poorly that long. So that's how it started. I started with keto. I started with Jason Fung, the bone broth, and then like to the keto with the Jason Fung. And I had a little calculator on my phone. And then I started reading about these like crazy carnivores and these zero carbers. And I was like, nah, that's just, I can't even go there. But the next thing I know, I was like, well, zero carb, that would be easier than being keto. Well, all carnivore, that would be easier. I do have sensitivities, regrettably. I do have dairy sensitivity. I have some pork sensitivity, egg sensitivity. So kind of the worst of it all was rashes. And the dermatologist was like, well, we don't know what they are. We'll do some biopsies to, so that we can know what topicals to give you. And I was like, that's not medicine. Like, that's not how it works. So I can still get some little rash flare-ups. And fortunately, they come quickly if I am like, I just have to try that pork loin or something like that. And also, I'd say what's a prevailing, what am I still living with is some tinnitus, and some joint inflammation. And that's just from eating off plan. When I traveled to India about 2.5 years ago as a meat eater and lived on lamb kebabs, I did eat. I was like, I am not going to touch lentils or rice the whole time that I'm there, or dal, or mung beans, or whatever. And, it's really part of the culture that people want to feed you in their home. And I had 2 bites of rice and lentils, or mung dal or something, mung beans. And I could just feel a fever right away. And I was in bed for 48 hours with a fever. My whole body was like red, and every single joint hurt. And I was like, never again. So I'm definitely have all that oxalate, sensitivities, but I have it underhand. And I definitely, one thing that I would absolutely say is a lot of the ideas, feelings that I had all these feelings like, I'm going to be rejected by my yoga community. I'm going to be rejected by my vegetarian friends or something. I really think that anxiety was a symptom of lack of brain nutrition.
Let me just a couple quick questions. 2 things. One is, you said you hopefully, they'll get us recognize your world record for the downward dog. Congratulations on that, by the way. And I'm just wondering if you felt that changing your diet improved your capacity to do yoga. And then the other thing I'm just curious about is, how is it being carnivore living on a boat? Because I guess you could get fish pretty easily, I suppose, if you fished, but how does that work? So let me just say, how did meat eating change your yoga capacity? And then talk about living on the boat.
I would say the way that meat eating changed my yoga capacity was, one, I really understood how every yogi that I was looking at, from the age of 20 and over, but particularly 50 and over, say my international, my, say, non-Indian based longtime yoga teachers and friends, they all have sarcopenia. And I really, through all my research, I came to realize how important it was, to build muscle. And I actually gravitated towards doing more strength training. And I did listen to Dr. ShawnBaker on Joe Rogan, and now I love the Joe Rogan show. And I heard Pavel Tsatsouline on Joe Rogan. I don't know if it's 8 or 9, or time is so strange. It was probably a year ago. And I took up the kettlebell, and I it improved my yoga and that I have more muscle, I have more stamina. I mean, people are like, what's your next world record? I'm like, maybe shoulder stand. I could do that for an hour. Maybe headstand. I could do that for 45 minutes. So the muscle has added. I become much more interested in moving and in developmental movement patterns. And I don't want to be doing these static poses. Even though they've done a lot for me and they're very helpful for many of my clients, it's really what's the right plan for the desired outcome, right? How do we apply the yoga for the desired outcome? So yoga ultimately is about being able to sit the yoga poses for a really, really long time in lotus pose, cross-legged on the floor, so that you have the opportunity to not have a screaming and kicking body, to sit quietly for meditation, say a 1 hour meditation or more. So actually yoga promotes sitting. All the seated poses promote sitting, and everything that we hear in modern life is so terrible for us because we sit all day. I think humans always sat. They sat on tree stumps. They sat on stones. They sat down to eat together. It's not like sitting was invented with the computer or something like that. We've always sat. So I realized how static I had become. And so yes, my yoga is stronger. I'm less interested in sitting. I'm more interested in developmental movement and things like that. So yes, it definitely helped me hold a downward dog for an hour and a half because I just felt strong. I felt stamina. My bones were clad with muscle. Then the other question on a boat, I have to say, Shawn, if you ever follow any people in the sailing community or the boating community, the biggest thing is provisioning. And people are trying to figure out how to have fresh fruits and vegetables on board, and also how to have like foods that store well. So people are eating a lot of canned food, a lot of packaged food, a lot of grains, a lot of pasta and things like that. And we just eat meat. We have the easiest provisioning in the whole world. So we, as I said, my boyfriend's been in the food biz. He does a great job at finding, the best prices at the local Piggly Wiggly. Did you know you could get New York strips for $5.99 a pound? When people say, isn't it expensive to eat that way? It's like, no. And this is nutritionally dense food. So we actually kind of kosher our meat. We cover it with, we bring the meat back to the boat. We put kosher salt on it and we sort of bag it up according to the portions. I eat 2 pounds of, generally I eat 2 pounds of steak every single day. And I eat to satiety, and I'm leaner, stronger, fitter than I've been since, I don't know, 20 to 30 years old when I was, all those things. And so we just buy meat and we buy sparkling water, seltzer, because grew up in New York. I love seltzer, and limes for our seltzer, not for scurvy. So it's really easy. We have very little waste. We do have a bunch of stuff on board, like canned fish, if we were to, be out at sea and run out of food. My boyfriend was also a commercial fisherman in Alaska. And I'm like, well, when are you going to get your fishing gear set up so I can see that you really know how to catch fish? So we have that too. But no, very easy to eat on the boat. We have a little grill outside, off the back of our boat, clamped on there. So we grill. If the weather is right and we're not going to, smoke out our neighbors, depending on the wind direction, or we just cook inside on a little kind of Coleman style stove. It's really easy provisioning. Yeah, we feel great.
And you can do I guess you can do yoga on the boat. I guess there's enough room for that. Is that something you do there?
Yeah, what I do is, I do I'd say my main yoga practices these days are, meditation and breathing practices. And I do some yoga, but I do yoga on, in marinas, on beaches, in little parks. I also, do some calisthenic routines and anything that I can do on my own. And I don't know if you've seen how Timothy Sheaf is working with this rope now, or I don't know if you know the WEC method. So I'm working with the rope training, and I really enjoy it a lot. Um, so yeah, I get all that in. And I have a community, like you do have a membership community called Kiki TV.life, where I share weekly meditations and I meet live Zoom calls, and I really have like a thrive section, like everything to help you thrive. And then I also have yoga philosophy and things like that. That's at KikiTV.life. And I created a code if anyone here wants a free month. If you went to sign up, it would be MEETRX, all caps, 2020, MEETRX 2020. Come do a free month and meet live or watch hundreds of hours of video.
That's and thank you for doing that. That's awesome.
Sure.
Wonderful. Let me, this has been just really fascinating. It's a lot of stuff that I have not sort of delved much into the yoga world or the history of India very much. I've got a very superficial understanding of that. And I know there's, I guess yoga has gotten a little more popular with males. And I know there's a wrestler, I think it was Diamond Dallas Page, is doing his
DDP yoga, that's right.
That some guys are doing. And you see the athletes that are doing that as a complement to the rest of their training. And, I guess, depending how much time you have, you can add it on as an athlete. I unfortunately probably don't have the time to do that in addition to the other stuff I have. Or at least I don't think I do. Maybe I don't, but maybe I do.
I would make a note about athletes, which is, someone always wants a skillful teacher. If you take someone who's a jumper or a runner, like a LeBron James or, and he were to sit on the ground cross-legged, chances are his knees would be up to his ears. That's where we want his knees. That's what makes him a great jumper. That's what makes him, bound down the court like that. So the idea that open hips are good for everyone is just not so. We can look at India. How many runners have they produced? How many basketball players? We see some great cricketers. But India, I think, because of the deep, just to get down to the basics, the squat toilet, right? Indians are great squatters. Well, they have to squat. They squat on the toilet. But that level of that type of flexibility is not promoting for jumping and running sports. So I think the best thing that anyone can do, the best tool from yoga that any athlete can take is really full nostril breathing, and to get rid of that mouth breathing, and to increase their VO2 with that. So
interesting. Thank you, Kiki. Anything else you'd like to share? If not, then I'd like to hear where everybody can find you outside of the KikiTV.net. I think you said, but where anything else you'd like to share, and then where to find you for people that might be interested.
I guess what I would share is something that I feel really strongly about is this idea of, clean eating and being clean, and and I would say that women have been they've been targeted through marketing to be clean. And if you look into the history of oh no, do I smell? You can find advertisements from the teens, the 20s, the 30s, targeting women around, are their clothes clean? Is their body clean? Are they clean? Consequently, and this has been very successful targeting with women. So the clean food movement perfectly aligns with that. Women are using a minimum of 18 products a day on their body. Men only use 5. And basically, this is fantastic. Women are just great to market to around this. And there's this idea of what's clean eating, or the idea that women somehow need to be clean or have purity. Women are especially, succumb to this. And I really feel that we want to eat our human nutrition and move in our developmental human ways. Movement longevity is one of the most important things we can have as we age. We will have an easy aging path to have movement longevity. So let's move like human beings move. Let's eat like human beings eat, and maintain a really strong mind. And especially now more than ever, I think we really have to choose the media that we let into our mind, and we just want to look to a few influencers or a few platforms where we get our great information. And peace of mind is probably our most precious gift. And proper nutrition does give us that feeling of peace of mind. And, playful and meaningful human movement gives us that as well.
Well, that's an excellent message. Kiki, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. And I look forward to your more records. And why don't you, I'll tell you what, next time you set a record, maybe we can we can have you back on to talk about it.
I would love that. Thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, because I'm going to try downward dog, maybe see if I can hold it for a minute.
Okay.
All right, you guys take care. Everybody have a good day. All right.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Take care.